They told me it was a bear. They lied. After 2 decades as a park ranger, I faced what truly hunts our national parks, the creature of legends. It's real, it's merciless, and the government has been covering it up for decades. What I saw, what marked me, will make you afraid to step into the woods again. My name is Elias Thorne, and for nearly 20 years I've served as a park ranger in the Bitterroot National Forest here in Montana. This isn't just a job, it's a way of life. I've known these mountains, these valleys, every gnarled pine and rushing creek, better than I've known most people. I've patrolled alone for countless miles, spent endless nights in observation towers, searched for more lost campers than I can count. I've seen the raw beauty of nature, the unforgiving bite of a Montana winter, the quiet majesty of a bull moose emerging from the mist. And I thought I'd seen it all, understood the rhythm of the wild. But what I'm about to tell you, it ain't easy to believe. That's why I kept my mouth shut for so long, let the official stories stand. Only now, with scars that never quite heal and memories that twist my dreams into nightmares, have I found the courage to speak. Because this isn't just some campfire legend, no tall tale to spook tourists. What's hunting out there in these woods, folks, is real. It all started back in September of 2013. The Bitterroot in autumn is something else. The larch trees turn this incredible golden color that lights up the mountainsides, and the air gets crisp, smelling of pine and impending snow. It's breathtaking, but it also brings a different kind of buzz. Tourists, hunters, folks looking to get one last taste of the wild before winter clamps down. And with them, inevitably, come the calls. Bear sightings near campsites, cougars spotted on trails, the occasional lost hiker. Most of the time they're false alarms, or easily explained. A black bear rummaging through a cooler, a startled cougar bolting away. Standard stuff. But that particular season, things started to feel different, off-kilter. The disappearances began to tick up, not in a way that screamed serial killer or natural disaster, but in a quieter, more insidious manner. A solo backpacker didn't check in. A couple on a day hike, their car still at the trailhead, but they were nowhere to be found. The search parties would go out. We'd comb the area, often finding nothing but empty silence. The official reports would chalk it up to folks getting disoriented, maybe falling, or just deciding to go off-grid. Though that last one always felt like a stretch for a family from Ohio. We'd write it off, but a knot of unease started to tighten in my gut. There was a pattern emerging, a subtle but undeniable increase in the number of folks who simply vanished. Then came the call that truly solidified the dread. 2 local hunters, brothers Jim and Billy, had gone deep into the backcountry, up near Squaw Peak. They were seasoned woodsmen, knew these trails like the back of their hand. When they didn't return after 3 days, their wives called it in, frantic. We dispatched a search and rescue team, myself included. We found them all right, or what was left of them. The scene was primal, gruesome. Their camp was a mess, blood splattered across the remnants of their tent and gear. The official report, when it came out, stated, bear attack. A grisly, aggressive and territorial, they said. I was there, though. I saw the bodies, and something was wrong. The claw marks, yes, they were deep, tearing flesh and bone. But they were too deep, impossibly so, as if the force applied was far beyond anything a grizzly could muster, even a big one. And their bones, shattered. Not just broken, but splintered, like kindling, almost pulverized. I've seen bear attacks, folks. They're brutal, no doubt. But this felt different, more deliberate, more vicious. It was like something had ripped them apart for the sheer joy of it, not just to eat. My stomach twisted and a cold sweat broke out on my brow despite the chill autumn air. We bagged the remains, went through the motions, but the image of those 2 men, torn to shreds, haunted me. The official narrative clicked into place. Dangerous wildlife, stay vigilant. But I knew, deep down, something far more sinister was at play. Something was hunting in these woods, and it wasn't just another bear. The bear attack story got filed, locked away in the system, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Except me. That knot in my stomach just kept getting tighter. It gnawed at me day and night. Those claw marks, those splintered bones, they were like a broken record playing in my head, each discordant note amplifying my unease. I couldn't let it go. My gut, after 2 decades in these woods, rarely lied. And my gut was screaming. So a few days later, under the guise of routine patrol, I went back. Alone. To the exact spot near Squaw Peak where we'd found Jim and Billy. The air was colder now, a thin sheet of ice beginning to form on the puddles. The forest held its breath, quiet and still, almost reverent in its silence. Or maybe it was just holding its breath for me. I spent hours combing the perimeter, moving slower than a snail, scrutinizing every fallen leaf, every disturbed patch of moss. I wasn't looking for more remains. I was looking for answers. I found them. Or rather, I found more questions. First, the trees. Ponderosa pines, big, sturdy bastards, stood sentinel around what had been the hunter's camp. I ran my hand over the bark of one particularly ancient giant. There, about 8 feet up, were deep gouges. Not superficial scrapes, but raw, tearing marks that had stripped away the bark and scored the wood beneath. Too high for any bear to reach comfortably, even standing on its hind legs. A grizzly might manage something like that if it was really stretching, but these weren't the kind of marks a bear made. These looked deliberate, powerful. Like something had used the tree to brace itself, or maybe in a struggle. My flashlight beam danced over them, highlighting the brutal efficiency of whatever had made them. My skin crawled. Then, the ground. Near a small, muddy creek bed, slightly hidden by a clump of huckleberry bushes, I found it. A footprint. It was massive, easily twice the size of my own boot, maybe more. But it wasn't just the size that sent shivers down my spine. The impression was clear in the damp earth. 4 distinct toes, widely splayed, each ending in an extended, formidable claw mark that had dug deep into the mud. And the heel. The heel had a distinctly human-like arch, a curve that was all wrong for an animal. It wasn't a bear's flat, plantigrade print. It wasn't a wolf's narrow, dog-like paw print. It was something else entirely. Something monstrously large, terrifyingly powerful, and utterly sickeningly familiar in its unsettling resemblance to a human foot. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of the woods. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. I pulled out my plaster casting kit, something I hadn't used in years for anything more exciting than a deer print for a kid's educational program. With shaking hands, I carefully mixed the plaster, poured it into the impression, and waited for it to set. It felt like an eternity. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves amplified into a threat. When I finally pulled the hardened cast from the mud, cleaning away the excess dirt, the reality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The print was undeniable. The sheer size, the splayed toes, those wicked claws, and that grotesque, almost human contour of the heel. It wasn't natural. Not in any way I understood. It was a predator, yes, but one that defied classification, one that shouldn't exist. Holding that cast, I felt a cold dread grip me, spreading through my veins like ice water. It was a physical piece of evidence that screamed, impossible, confirming my deepest, most unsettling fears about what truly stalks the Bitterroot. And that official bear attack story? It just disintegrated in my mind, replaced by a much, much darker truth. The plaster cast, wrapped in an old cloth, sat in the toolbox in the back of my patrol truck. Every time I looked at it, every time I remembered the brutal scene at Squaw Peak, a cold wave washed over me. I wanted to show it to someone, anyone, but the memory of the brass shutting down my initial doubts kept my mouth sealed. Who would believe me? A lone ranger with a bizarre footprint and a gut feeling against an official, neatly packaged explanation. I knew better than to stir the pot just yet. But the uneasy peace in my world, the one I'd built over 2 decades, was shattered. Then came the call about the Millers, a family of 4, Mark and Sarah and their 2 kids, a boy, 8-year-old Ethan, and his younger sister Lily, maybe 6. They were from Omaha, Nebraska, on what was supposed to be a scenic fall camping trip. They'd registered for a 3-day trek on the Black Hollow Trail, a notoriously rugged, winding path that dove deep into some of the more isolated sections of the park. When they didn't check out on their scheduled day and no one could reach them, a worried relative called it in. The sense of dread that had been simmering within me boiled over. Black Hollow wasn't just any trail. It was remote, steep in places, and known for its thick undergrowth and misleading game paths. Easy to get lost, sure, but a whole family? Something felt off. We got the call late afternoon. I immediately organized a search team. 2 other rangers, Hank and Brenda, both experienced. We raced out to the Black Hollow trailhead. The first thing we found was their vehicle, a beige minivan neatly parked in the small gravel lot, locked tight. Nothing seemed amiss. No signs of a struggle, no broken windows. Just an empty car, waiting. And that, in itself, was a chilling detail. It meant they'd gone into the woods willingly, oblivious. The sun was already dipping towards the western peaks, casting long, eerie shadows through the dense canopy as we geared up. Our radios crackled with routine checks, but the atmosphere among us was anything but routine. We were all thinking it. After what happened to the hunters, after the increasing disappearances, there was a palpable tension in the air. "All right, folks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We stick to the trail first. Call out, listen for responses. Keep your eyes peeled for anything out of place." We started our ascent. The trail was already swallowed by shadows, the air growing colder by the minute. The sounds of the forest, usually a comforting symphony of rustling leaves and distant birdsong, seemed muted, almost hesitant. We called out the Millers' names, our voices echoing into the vast, indifferent wilderness. "Mark, Sarah, Ethan, Lily." Nothing but the wind sighing through the pines and the crunch of our own boots on the rocky path. After an hour, Hank, always the pragmatic one, spoke up. "Elias, sun's setting fast. Maybe we should focus on the immediate area, then regroup for a proper dawn search?" I nodded, my gaze sweeping the darkening woods. Every instinct in my body screamed against stopping. The light was fading fast, but something urged me forward, a cold premonition that every lost minute was precious. "Just a little further," I said, my voice low. "I've got a bad feeling about this one." We pushed on, our flashlights now cutting narrow beams through the gloom. The forest felt heavier, denser, as if the trees themselves were pressing in on us, watching. The silence was unnerving, more profound than any I'd ever experienced out here. No chirping crickets, no rustling nocturnal creatures, just a heavy, unnatural stillness that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. As dusk finally swallowed the last vestiges of daylight, Brenda, a younger ranger with keen eyes, suddenly stopped dead in her tracks, her flashlight beam fixed on something off the main path, barely visible through a thicket of tangled undergrowth. "Elias, look," she whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and disbelief. I moved closer, my heart thumping. There, half buried in a pile of fallen leaves, was a torn piece of brightly colored nylon, splattered with dark, dried blood. It was a section of a camping tent, and it was clear it hadn't torn from wear and tear. This was a piece of fabric ripped with incredible force, a violent, desperate struggle. It wasn't a good sign. It meant they hadn't just gotten lost. They'd run into something terrible. The discovery of the torn tent fabric sent a jolt of ice through all of us. No one needed to say it, but the unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just a search and rescue anymore. This was something far more grim. We marked the spot, radioed back to base, and reluctantly made the call to set up a perimeter and wait for daylight. Pushing further into that absolute darkness, knowing what might be out there, wasn't just reckless, it was suicidal. That night was interminable. I barely slept in my patrol truck, the fragment of tent fabric lying on my dashboard, reflecting the faint glow of the moon. Every rustle of leaves, Every groan of the ancient trees sounded like footsteps, like a presence moving in the darkness, just beyond the thin metal of my vehicle. The unsettling feeling from Squaw Peak had returned, stronger, more suffocating. First light broke through the pines like a sickly yellow bruise. We were back on the trail at first opportunity, reinforced by a few more seasoned rangers. We followed the faint path of disturbed undergrowth that Brenda had found, away from the official trail, deeper into the tangled, untouched wilderness of Black Hollow. It wasn't a game trail. It was a path of forced entry, broken branches and scraped earth leading into a hidden ravine. The silence was still heavy, devoid of any birdsong or the usual morning chorus of the forest. It was a silence that spoke of flight and of something that had cleared the woods. After nearly 2 hours of slow, painstaking progress, pushing through dense brush and scrambling over rocky terrain, Hank pointed. "There! I see it!" Nestled in a small hidden clearing, a place no casual hiker would ever stumble upon, was the Miller family's camp, or what was left of it. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over me, a feeling of cold dread that went beyond anything I'd experienced before. The scene was a nightmare made real. The tent, a vibrant blue in the brochure, was now a tattered mess. It wasn't just ripped, it was shredded, utterly destroyed. And the direction of the tears. They weren't from the outside in, like an animal trying to get into a tent. No, these tears, these violent wrens, they were clearly from the inside out. As if something or someone trapped inside had exploded with impossible force, desperate to escape, or desperate to get out. And then, the blood. Dark, almost black patches, already dried and caked onto the ground, on the shredded fabric, on the scattered rocks. It stained everything, a grim testament to the violence that had unfolded. My eyes scanned the clearing, searching frantically, hoping for any sign of life, of a struggle, of anything that could give us a clue. We found only one body. Mark Miller, the father. He lay sprawled near the tattered remains of the tent, his clothes shredded. But the most horrifying detail, the one that made my breath catch in my throat and bile rise in my throat, was that his head was missing. Cleanly severed, nowhere to be found. His body was savaged, deep claw marks marring his torso, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. But the decapitation, that was a level of brutality I had never witnessed, even in the most gruesome animal attacks. It was surgical in its horror, precise in its devastation. The rest of the family, Sarah, Ethan, and little Lily, they were gone. No trace, no bodies, no screams, just empty, blood-stained earth. We swept the area for hours, desperate, meticulous. Nothing. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air, plucked from the earth by some unseen force. As I stood there surveying the horror, my eyes caught on something small, half buried under a clump of pine needles near where the children's sleeping bags would have been. It was a small, mud-splattered teddy bear, bright pink, its one button eye staring blankly at the sky. It was pristine, untouched by the savagery that had destroyed everything else around it. It hadn't been ripped or torn or smeared with blood, just abandoned. A silent, chilling testament to the innocent lives caught in this terror. I bent down, my fingers trembling slightly, and picked it up. The crushing weight of it in my hand, so light yet so heavy, was unbearable. I pocketed it, a silent promise to myself. This wasn't a bear, not a cougar. This was something else, something intelligent, something that knew exactly what it was doing. The official report for the Miller family, just like the hunters, came back swift and decisive. Grizzly bear attack, likely territorial. The decapitated head, scavenging by other animals. The missing family members, dragged away. It was a neat, tidy explanation, designed to close the books and calm public fears. But I had seen the scene. I had the plaster cast of that impossible footprint. I had the image of that shredded tent, torn from the inside out. And I had the weight of a little pink teddy bear in my pocket. I couldn't let it stand. I marched into Ranger Station HQ, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and fear. My superiors, Chief Ranger Peterson and Assistant Chief Davies, both seasoned men, sat across from me. I laid it all out. The uncanny depth of the claw marks on the hunters, the splintered bones, the impossibly high scratches on the pines, and then I pulled out the plaster cast, carefully unwrapping it from its cloth. "Chief," I began, my voice tight with conviction, "this isn't a grizzly. I've seen grizzlies, been charged by grizzlies. This print, this is something else. And the Miller family's tent ripped from the inside, the father's head missing, the others vanished. Bears don't do that, not like this." Peterson stared at the cast, his face unreadable for a long moment. Then he let out a slow, deliberate sigh. "Elias," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I understand your concerns. You're a good ranger, an observant one. But we've got protocols, experts have weighed in. This is the official conclusion." Davies, a man notorious for his by-the-book approach, leaned forward. "Ranger Thorne, you need to understand the implications of what you're suggesting. Public panic, park closures, loss of federal funding. We can't have unsubstantiated theories running wild. The safety of the public and the integrity of the national park system demand a clear, consistent narrative." "But the evidence," I started, gesturing to the cast. Peterson cut me off, his eyes hardening. "The evidence points to an unusually aggressive bear. We've issued warnings. We've reinforced safety protocols. Your job, Elias, is to uphold those, to maintain the official narrative. Do you understand?" It wasn't a question. It was a threat. I could feel the invisible wall rising between me and them, the unspoken order to fall in line, or else. I looked into their eyes, searching for understanding, for even a flicker of doubt. Instead, I saw a strange mixture of resolve and fear. Yes, fear. Not fear for public safety, not the fear of bureaucratic fallout, but a raw, primal fear, as if they knew exactly what I was talking about and were terrified of it. I left that office feeling colder than any Montana winter, isolated, paranoid. They weren't just dismissing me, they were silencing me. That night, I was on duty, alone in Watchtower 7, perched high on the eastern ridge overlooking the sprawling expanse of Bitterroot. A full moon, huge and luminous, hung in the ink-black sky, casting an ethereal glow over the distant mountains, painting the pines in silver and shadow. The wind whistled through the gaps in the old wooden tower, a mournful song that seemed to carry the secrets of the wilderness. I'd seen thousands of full moons from that tower, listened to countless nights. Around 3 a.m., as the night was at its deepest and coldest, I heard it. A sound that reached into the deepest, most primal parts of my being and twisted them into knots. It wasn't a wolf's mournful call, nor a coyote's yelp. It was deeper, more guttural, but with an eerie, almost human-like quality. It was a howl, yes, but not like any animal I'd ever heard. It resonated with an ancient sorrow, a raw agony, and a terrifying power that vibrated through the very structure of the tower. It tore through the silent forest like a declaration, a warning, carrying with it a chilling intelligence that transcended mere animal instinct. My blood ran cold, the hair on my arms stood on end. I wasn't just hearing it, I was feeling it, deep in my bones. It was the sound that confirmed every fear, every gut feeling, every impossible piece of evidence. It was the sound of what had killed the hunters, what had shredded the miller's tent, what had taken that family. It was a sound that made it clear I wasn't alone, and that something utterly unknown and terrifying was very, very real and very, very close. The howl faded into the vastness of the Bitterroot, but its echo lingered, not just in the air, but in my very soul, a haunting melody of dread. The howl became a part of me, a persistent echo in my skull, a soundtrack to my waking paranoia. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every rustle of leaves sounded like heavy footsteps. The Bitterroot, once my sanctuary, now felt like a vast, beautiful prison, and I, a marked man, trapped within its terrifying perimeter. My superiors, after my failed attempt to sway them, wasted no time. "Ranger Thorne, you're on desk duty for a few weeks," they said, "to catch up on paperwork." It was a flimsy excuse, a transparent attempt to sideline me. I knew it, and they knew I knew it. But the unspoken message was clear: stay quiet, or face the consequences. I went through the motions, shuffling reports, stamping forms, but my mind was a whirlwind of frantic investigation, piecing together the fragments of a dark, impossible truth. I tried to act normal, to blend in, but the fear in their eyes was undeniable. When Chief Peterson spoke about maintaining the safety of the public, his gaze would dart nervously to the windows, as if expecting something to materialize from the dense pines outside. Assistant Chief Davies, usually so unflappable, had a perpetual furrow in his brow and a tremor in his hand that he tried to hide when he poured his coffee. They weren't just protecting a narrative, they were protecting a secret, and they were terrified of what would happen if it got out. I started paying closer attention, listening in on hushed conversations in the break room, lingering a little longer when senior rangers were talking in low tones, and I began to hear things. Whispers, half-finished sentences, references that chilled me to the bone. Another seasonal problem cropping up early this year. I heard one grizzled veteran, old Ranger Cole, muttering to another, Ranger Jenkins. Cole had served in these parks since the Vietnam era, a man who rarely showed emotion, but there was a profound weariness in his voice. Jenkins replied, his voice barely audible, "Yeah, thought we had a handle on it after that incident in Glacier back in '98. Seems like they're getting bolder." Glacier? My ears perked up. Another national park. Seasonal problem. Getting bolder? It wasn't just here. It was larger. Later I overheard them talking about old records, vague references to files that had been sealed or reclassified decades ago. They spoke in code, using euphemisms like wildlife management issues or unusual predator behavior, but the underlying tension in their voices spoke volumes. They were talking about it, whatever it was. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many others knew? The park system, this vast, iconic symbol of American wilderness, was built on a foundation of a lie, and I was now a part of it, albeit unwillingly. The weight of that knowledge was suffocating. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly looking over my shoulder, even when I was alone in my small cabin. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows, made me jump. My paranoia intensified, but it also fueled my clandestine research. I started digging cautiously, using my access to old archives and official reports, looking for anything that might link these unusual predator behaviors to other parks, other incidents. Most of it was heavily redacted, sanitized for public consumption. But sometimes a detail would slip through the cracks, a phrase that resonated with the terror I had witnessed. Late one night, after everyone else had left the station, I was meticulously sifting through some old digital files, cross-referencing dates and locations mentioned in those whispered conversations. My screen flickered, and then a new email popped up. The sender was anonymous, the subject line a simple, chilling phrase, "They know you know." My heart leaped into my throat. I hesitated, then clicked. The email contained only one attachment, a blurry, grainy photo of an ancient yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline was almost indecipherable, but I could make out, "Family vanishes in Yellowstone backcountry, bear attack suspected." The date on the clipping was from the 1960s. The details, though vague, echoed the tragic disappearance of the Miller family, almost eerily similar. A family camp, blood, one body found mutilated, others gone without a trace. It was a gut punch, confirming everything I suspected. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a dark, terrifying history, meticulously covered up, stretching back decades, perhaps even longer. Someone out there was watching me, someone who knew the truth and was trying to help or perhaps to warn me. My isolation was complete, But I was no longer alone in my suspicion. The game was on. Weeks crawled by, each day heavier than the last. The email, the newspaper clipping, they were carefully tucked away, hidden from prying eyes. My desk duty eventually ended, but the weight of the secret, the knowledge that I was a pawn in a much larger, darker game, never lifted. I felt a target on my back, constantly scanning the tree lines, listening to the silence. My rifle felt heavier, yet useless, at my side. It was late October now. The golden larch had mostly shed their needles, leaving the mountainside stark and skeletal. The air had a biting cold edge, a foretaste of winter's harsh embrace. A thick, unsettling fog had rolled into the Bitterroot that afternoon, clinging to the valleys and swallowing the higher peaks. Visibility was reduced to mere feet, transforming the familiar landscape into a ghostly, shifting labyrinth. I was on solo patrol, assigned to the Ravine Creek area. Remote, dense, not many official trails, mostly old logging roads long since reclaimed by nature. The kind of place where you could lose yourself and never be found. My truck crept along the gravel track, the headlights cutting through the swirling mist, revealing only fleeting glimpses of ancient pines and dripping undergrowth. The oppressive silence in the forest was what got to me first. No wind whistling through the branches, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. No bird song, not even the distant caw of a crow. No rustle of deer in the underbrush, no chirping of crickets. Nothing. It was a silence that felt unnatural, a vacuum where life should have been. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, or perhaps already knew what was coming. I killed the engine, letting the silence fully envelop me. It was absolute, profound, a silence that hummed with unseen energy, with a lurking presence. My breath plumed in the cold air, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me, telling me to turn back, to get out of there. But a grim determination, fueled by the memory of Jim and Billy and the Miller family, pushed me forward. I had to know. I had to face it. I grabbed my rifle, checked the chamber, the familiar weight a small comfort, though deep down I knew it wouldn't be enough. I slung it over my shoulder, grabbed my powerful LED flashlight, and stepped out into the swirling fog. The cold immediately bit into my exposed skin. My boots crunched softly on the fallen pine needles and damp earth. Each step felt incredibly loud in the suffocating silence. I walked for maybe 15 minutes, pushing deeper into the fog-shrouded woods, following a barely discernible deer path that paralleled Ravine Creek. The mist swirled around me, twisting the shapes of trees into monstrous figures, playing tricks on my eyes. Then I caught it. A smell. Faint at first, a metallic tang that pricked at the back of my throat. I paused, sniffing the air, trying to place it. It was like old blood, but deeper, richer, mixed with something else, something foul. I pushed on, the scent growing stronger with every step. It was no longer faint, it was a cloying, heavy odor that clung to the damp air. Iron, and something else. Something rotten, meat. But not just any meat. It was the smell of decomposition, yes, but mixed with a pungent, almost acrid musk. A predatory stench that was utterly unlike anything I had ever encountered in the wild. It was a smell so strong, so viscerally wrong, that it almost made me gag. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I forced it down. My flashlight beam cut through the fog, sweeping through the trees, creating an eerie, shifting landscape. The putrid odor grew overwhelming, thick and cloying, leading me deeper into the heart of the ravine. My heart was pounding now, a frantic drum against the silence. It was the smell of death, raw and undeniable, but also something ancient, something that radiated pure, untamed menace. And then, through the swirling mist, my flashlight beam landed on something that made my blood run cold. An ancient, gnarled pine, its bark deeply scored by raw, fresh gouges, far too high for any bear, indicating immense strength and an unnatural reach. The fresh sap weeping from the wounds mingled with the stench of decay, sealing my dread. Whatever had done this was close, very close. The smell was a physical assault, clinging to my clothes, filling my lungs with its metallic, decaying stench. It was the smell of pure, primal horror, and it was getting stronger, leading me like a morbid guide. My breath hitched in my throat. I raised my rifle, holding it ready, my grip white-knuckled. The safety was off. My flashlight beam danced frantically, cutting through the thick fog, painting fleeting, monstrous shadows on the trees. Every nerve in my body was screaming. Then I heard it, a sound, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. The distinct snap of a branch, a heavy, deliberate tread. Not the light-footed step of a deer or the shuffling gait of a bear. This was something else. Powerful, predatory. Each step resonated with immense weight, a thudding rhythm on the damp earth that seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. And then breathing, deep, raspy, a guttural inhale and exhale, as if something enormous was drawing in the air, tasting it, scenting for me. It was close, too close. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drum solo of sheer terror. My mouth was dry, my palms slick with sweat despite the frigid air. I forced myself to move, my feet feeling like lead, following the sounds, pushing through the swirling, suffocating fog. The sounds grew louder, closer. A low growl, almost a rumble, emanated from the mist. It wasn't the snarl of a bear, nor the defensive rumble of a cougar. It was something far more ancient, far more menacing, filled with a raw, terrifying intelligence. My flashlight beam cut a path through the opaque shroud, sweeping left, then right, trying to pierce the veil. And then for a split second, the light caught something. A flash of dark fur, impossibly tall. My breath caught in my throat. I swung the beam back, holding it steady, forcing myself to look. The light landed on something impossible to describe without trembling. It was there, standing barely 20 yards away, partially obscured by the shifting mist, a towering silhouette against the backdrop of the pines. My mind, trained for decades to identify and categorize every animal in the forest, rebelled. It wasn't an animal, not one I knew. It was huge, more than 8.5 feet tall, easily. Its massive frame was encased in thick, dark, matted fur, like a shadow made manifest. Broad shoulders, a chest that seemed to ripple with coiled muscle, far more powerful than any grizzly I'd ever encountered. It stood on 2 legs, hunched slightly, but its sheer bulk was overwhelming. My eyes traveled up, fear gripping me with icy fingers. The head was grotesque, a horrifying, nightmarish fusion of wolf and man. A pronounced snout, yes, but with a human-like jawline beneath it. Ears, pointed and covered in dark fur, twitched, picking up every sound. And the mouth, a gaping maw filled with elongated, razor-sharp teeth that glinted wetly in the beam of my light, saliva dripping from their tips onto the matted fur of its chest. But it was the eyes that truly cemented the terror. They weren't the wild, unthinking eyes of a beast. They glowed, a chilling, predatory amber, like burning coals, fixed on me. And in those eyes I saw not just hunger, not just feral instinct, but something else. An ancient, malevolent intelligence, a profound awareness. It saw me. It understood. And it filled me with a primal, overwhelming terror that seemed to strip away my very soul. I froze, utterly, completely paralyzed. My rifle felt like a feather in my hands. My training, my years of experience, all of it evaporated in an instant, replaced by a deep, instinctive dread that seized every muscle, every thought. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The air crackled with a silent, terrifying electricity. The creature stood there watching me, its massive chest rising and falling with that deep, raspy breathing, its amber eyes reflecting not just predatory intent, but an ancient, chilling intelligence that seemed to strip away my very soul. It was real. The howl was real, the monster was real, and I was standing directly in its path. The creature moved. Slowly at first, a shift in its hulking mass, then a deliberate lean forward. The silence that had held the Ravine Creek area captive shattered as a low, guttural growl. A sound like grinding stone and tearing flesh rumbled in its massive chest. It wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. A sound that vibrated through the ground, through my boots, straight into my bones, shaking me to my core. My mind, paralyzed only moments before, snapped into frantic overdrive. "Run!" my instinct screamed. "Shoot!" my training countered. But my legs were locked, rooted to the damp earth, and my hands trembled violently on the rifle, barely holding it steady. The sheer impossibility of what stood before me was a wall of terror. Then it charged, not like a charging bear, a lumbering, powerful rush. This was different, faster, more agile. A blur of dark fur and raw power covering the distance between us in terrifyingly few strides. The fog swirled around its massive form, making it seem even more spectral, more monstrous. Its roaring intensified, a deafening sound that ripped through the air, drowning out every other thought, every other sound. Some primal flicker of self-preservation kicked in. I brought the rifle up, aiming roughly for its center mass, and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. Blam, blam! The shots cracked through the silence, deafening in the enclosed ravine, and the muzzle flash briefly illuminated the creature's grotesque face, those amber eyes burning with fury. The bullets hit. I saw the fur ripple, heard a sickening thud. The creature flinched, a flicker of pain, or perhaps annoyance, crossing its features. It slowed, but only for a fraction of a second. The impact, which would have dropped any lesser animal, merely jostled it. It was like shooting at a brick wall. My heart sank. This wasn't going to work. Then it was on me. Before I could even cycle another round, its massive clawed hand, impossibly fast, lashed out. I saw it coming but couldn't react. It wasn't a swipe, not a clawing attack. It was a brutal, overwhelming shove. I felt an incredible force slam into my chest, felt the air explode from my lungs, felt the sickening crack of bone as my body was hurled backward. I flew through the air, my rifle clattering uselessly to the ground, and slammed against the trunk of an ancient ponderosa pine with sickening force. A searing pain exploded in my side, a sharp white-hot agony that stole my breath. I crumpled to the ground, gasping, every movement sending jolts of agony through my ribcage. Broken, definitely broken. My vision swam, speckled with black. I lay there, helpless, curled on the cold, damp earth, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. My lungs struggled for air, each shallow breath a torment. This was it. This was the end. I had faced down bears, cougars, even rogue elk. But this was beyond anything. This was what hunted in the dark, what preyed on the unsuspecting, what lived in the hidden corners of the world, immune to our bullets, our logic, our very understanding. I closed my eyes, bracing for the final fatal blow. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a heavy, warm presence loom over me, blocking out the faint moonlight. I forced my eyes open, my vision blurry. The creature stood there, towering over me, its massive silhouette outlined against the swirling fog. Its grotesque snout, dripping with saliva, lowered slowly, cautiously towards my face. I could feel its hot, foul breath, smelling of iron and rotting meat, washing over me. A low growl rumbled deep in its chest again, not of rage, but something different. It sniffed me, a long, deliberate inhale, its powerful nostrils flaring, taking in my scent, my fear, my very essence. It wasn't a prelude to a kill. It was something else, a strange, primal ritual. It was marking me, claiming me in some inexplicable way. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it turned. Its amber eyes, still burning with that chilling intelligence, swept over me one last time, a fleeting, almost contemplative glance. Then, with a speed that defied its immense size, it vanished into the swirling, impenetrable darkness, its heavy footsteps fading quickly as it retreated back into the depths of the Ravine Creek area, leaving me broken, bleeding, and utterly, profoundly alone. The world spun, and I blacked out, the stench of iron and fear clinging to me like a shroud. I woke up hours later. The cold was what bit through the pain first, then the throbbing agony in my side. My ribs screamed with every shallow breath. The fog had lifted, replaced by the biting pre-dawn chill. The air was crisp, clean, but the putrid stench of the creature still clung to my nostrils, a phantom smell that would haunt me for years. My head pounded, a dull throb that made every movement excruciating. My rifle was gone, lost somewhere in the undergrowth during the struggle. My radio, clipped to my vest, was smashed, its casing cracked, wires exposed. Useless. I was alone, miles from civilization, gravely injured and battling the creeping onset of hypothermia. It took me an eternity to drag myself out of that ravine. Every inch was a battle, a test of will against the excruciating pain. I crawled, I limped, I stumbled, using fallen logs and trees as crutches, fueled by a raw, desperate will to survive. The sun was already high in the sky by the time I finally stumbled, half conscious and delirious, onto a remote logging road where a lone timber truck driver heading for an early start found me. Weeks blurred into a haze of pain, medication, and the sterile white walls of the hospital. Officially, the story was a bear attack. A rogue grizzly, they said, came out of hibernation early, surprised me on patrol. I went along with it. What else could I do? Tell them about the 8-foot-tall wolf man? They'd lock me up in the psych ward or worse, quietly disappear me. But the doctors, they were suspicious. The cuts on my body, though deep, didn't quite match known bear claws. The impact trauma, the sheer force that had shattered my ribs, baffled them. Remarkable strength, I overheard one doctor murmur to a nurse, almost like he was hit by a truck. They probed, they questioned, but I stuck to the script, feigning memory loss about the finer details. My injuries were bad enough. My sanity didn't need to be questioned too. I recovered slowly, physically anyway. The broken ribs healed, leaving a dull ache that still flares up on cold mornings. But the scars, the real ones, were etched onto my soul. The stench, the roar, the amber eyes, the terrifying intelligence. They replayed in my mind every time I closed my eyes. The howl still echoed in my dreams, twisting familiar forest sounds into nightmares. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd wake with a jolt, feeling an undeniable sensation of being watched, a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I was discharged from the hospital, a shell of the ranger I once was. The park offered me a desk job, a quiet retirement. I took it, grateful for the chance to stay connected to the woods, even if it was from behind a computer screen. But my true work was just beginning. A few days after I returned to my cabin, a package arrived anonymously. No return address, no sender's name. Just a plain brown box taped shut. My heart hammered. Was it a threat? A warning? I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, nestled among crumpled newspaper, was an old, tattered journal. Its leather cover was cracked and faded, its pages brittle with age. It looked like it had been salvaged from a fire, or maybe buried for decades. I opened it, my fingers tracing the faded script within. It was a handwritten log, a personal account. The first entry was dated 1961. The author, a park ranger named Thomas Vance, detailed a series of unexplained incidents in Glacier National Park. Missing campers, mutilated livestock, and a chilling account of a monstrous shadow beast he'd glimpsed in the fog. He wrote about strange footprints, about desperate hushed meetings with superiors, about being silenced. My blood ran cold as I read, each entry mirroring my own horrifying experience, echoing the stories I'd overheard, the newspaper clipping I'd received. The journal, brittle with age, hinted at a pattern, a dark secret passed down through generations of park rangers, suggesting a horrifying truth far more widespread than I ever imagined. The anonymous sender of the email knew, and they had sent me a lifeline, a desperate message from the past. The journal became my gospel, my secret companion. Ranger Vance's meticulous, if terrified, entries from the 60s confirmed every suspicion, every unspoken fear that gnawed at me. His despair, his disbelief, his ultimate resignation It all resonated with chilling familiarity. He wrote of the same impossible footprints, the same brutal, inexplicable attacks, the same official cover-ups. He too had been ordered to maintain the official narrative, silenced and isolated. He even mentioned the distinct nauseating stench, the amber eyes, the unnerving intelligence. It wasn't just me, it wasn't just Bitterroot. This creature was real, and it had been haunting these national parks for decades, probably longer. I dedicated my life to uncovering the truth. My new desk job, meant to sideline me, became my clandestine base of operations. I used my access to park archives, cross-referencing missing persons reports, official animal attack files, and ranger shift logs. It was a painstaking, often frustrating process. Most documents were heavily redacted, dates altered, details scrubbed clean. But if you knew what to look for, if you could read between the lines, the pattern emerged. I started reaching out, cautiously at first, to other retired rangers. Men and women who had seen things, experienced things, but had learned to keep their mouths shut. It was a slow dance, a careful probing, testing the waters. Some dismissed me as a crackpot, too many years in the sun, but others responded with a quiet, knowing look. They'd share hushed anecdotes, half-remembered stories from deep in the backcountry, always prefaced with, "Now don't you ever repeat this, but back in '87 in Yosemite," or "Heard from a buddy in Olympic that some weird stuff went down in '03. I pieced together a terrifying mosaic. Similar incidents in Yellowstone, Glacier, Yosemite, Olympic National Park, even down in the Great Smoky Mountains, always in remote areas, always around the fall, leading into winter. Always blamed on rogue predators, always followed by an official clampdown, a hurried press release, and a swift closure of the case. I delved into obscure online forums, the kind of places where truth seekers and conspiracy theorists converged. Most of it was garbage, but occasionally, a nugget of chilling truth would surface. An old photo of an enormous, unidentifiable paw print. A grainy audio recording of a distant, inhuman howl. Witness accounts, often ridiculed from remote homesteaders or isolated hunters, speaking of something tall, furry, and impossibly fast that moved through the night. The government knew. That was the most sickening revelation. This wasn't just a series of isolated incidents. It was a widespread, systemic cover-up. The very purpose of some night patrols, I learned from a retired warden from the Rockies, wasn't just to protect campers from bears, but to keep people away from certain areas, especially during specific phases of the moon. They knew the patterns. They tracked them. They managed the narrative. They preserved public safety by concealing the monstrous truth, protecting the credibility of the parks, perhaps even protecting something far more insidious. The Journal of Thomas Vance had one final, chilling entry, almost lost in the brittle, crumbling pages. It was dated just weeks before his official disappearance during a hiking accident, scribbled frantically, almost illegibly. "They will not let you speak. The silence protects not us, but them." The word "them" was underlined multiple times, clawed into the paper with desperate force. Elias's blood ran cold. Them. Who were they? The creatures themselves? Or the people, the government officials, who were actively concealing the truth? The implication was horrifying. The cover-up wasn't just to protect the public from panic, but to protect the creatures themselves, or at least their existence. And if that was true, then how many were there? How many of these werewolves were silently stalking the vast, beautiful wilderness of America? The web of lies stretched far beyond anything I could have imagined, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the wild, and into the very fabric of our perceived safety. Years have passed since that terrifying night in Ravine Creek, more than a decade. The Bitterroot still calls to me, its mountains a silent, majestic presence outside my window. But it's not the same. I'm not the same. My body carries the physical scars, the lingering ache in my ribs, the faint marks that don't quite match any known animal attack. But the deeper scars, the ones etched onto my soul, they are the ones that never heal. The smell still assaults me in unexpected moments, a phantom stench of iron and rotting meat. The uivo, the howl, still echoes in my dreams, twisting the tranquil sounds of the forest into primal nightmares. And sometimes, in the profound silence of the deepest part of the night, I still feel it. That cold prickle on the back of my neck, that undeniable sensation of being watched. I've lived with this truth, locked away in my mind for far too long. I've seen the reports come in over the years, subtle shifts in wording, continued disappearances, always explained away. My old colleagues, the few who dared to whisper, they know. The younger rangers, they hear the legends, the local folklore, but they don't understand the depth of it. The night patrol exists, not just to protect, but to contain, to keep people away from the real hunters. The werewolf isn't a legend, folks. It's not some spooky story conjured to frighten kids around a campfire. It's real, it's alive, and it's hunting. It always has been. And the government, the very people sworn to protect us, they know. They've known for decades. The full extent of their complicity, the full horror of how many of these creatures are out there, silently stalking our national parks. That we may never truly know. My time is running out. I feel it. The weight of this secret has become unbearable. And that feeling of being watched, it's stronger now, more persistent. Maybe it's coming back for me. Maybe it sensed my struggle, my defiance, my growing determination to speak. I don't know. But I can't stay silent any longer. Not when more people are venturing into the wild, oblivious to the true terror that lurks beyond the marked trails. So, if you ever find yourself camping in a national forest, anywhere across this vast country of ours, remember this. When the sun dips below the horizon and the night begins to fall, when the wind finally dies down and the forest settles into a strange, heavy silence, listen. Listen closely to the sounds around you. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. Those are the sounds of life. But if you hear a howl, a sound that doesn't quite fit, a sound that is deeper, more guttural than any wolf, more human, filled with an ancient pain and a chilling intelligence, a howl that sends a cold dread straight to your bones. Do not respond. Do not light a fire. Do not make a sound. Just pray. Pray to whatever God you believe in that it's not behind you. Pray that it's not hunting you. Pray that it passes you by, a shadow in the night moving on to another. Less aware pray, because I carry the marks on my body and in my soul, a constant reminder of that night. And I'm confessing this now because I know that sooner or later it will return. Maybe for me, maybe for you. But one thing, folks, is for certain. The werewolf is real, and it never stopped hunting. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales, and leave a comment below to let me know what you thought. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? What city, what country? Let me know in the comments.